Hello, Bob and Buffy. How are you?
Hi,
Evening,
Todd. Ken, Annie.
Penny.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi, Kenneth.
Social hour started earlier than I thought it might have. That's good.
3 minutes earlier, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I may have made a mistake. I came back from Canada early. We left on Sunday morning, and I found out yesterday that Sunday night they had incredible northern lights.
Oh, what?
Oh, really?
That's a
saw
shame.
Oh
I
man.
saw that story, and my gal showed me.
Yeah,
I
I
was
mean,
just like, oh, come
and
on.
I'm sure from where I am, it would have it was been phenomenal.
I'm
Because
sure
the
it was.
Cars were
because I
very
saw it
nice the
in
night
Maine, but-
before.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I've still yet to see them this way. My gal, she was born in Alaska, so she saw them on the regular. It was an average everyday thing. Um,
Yeah, no,
but for
it's
me, not in a
unbelievable
long
though.
time.
All right.
Oh well,
Oh, there'll be
maybe
another day.
maybe
Ken.
next time. Well, let's hope so.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going north with global climate change.
Well, I
Yeah,
saw
I
them
know.
in Maine 20 years ago.
Yeah,
We
So-
saw them. We saw them on a drive across Pennsylvania in the 70s,
yeah.
but not as spectacular as what you see in the photographs that
Yeah.
people have shown from Michigan
Oh yeah.
and Minnesota and Nova Scotia and things like that. But oh well.
Well, I must say, growing up in South Central Ontario as a kid, we saw them, many, many times at night.
Yeah,
Where
I
did
can
you
imagine.
grow up in South Central Ontario?
St. Thomas, Ontario.
Where's
Oh,
that?
really? Huh.
What-
Okay, well, since we do have a quorum, why don't we get going?
Would you
Good idea.
like me to move to accept the minutes of the last meeting?
Why, you anticipated my request.
I do.
Why
I've
you're
got it.
upset?
Okay,
Both of us
but-
born in New York City. It'll do it every time.
Okay, before you do, well, go ahead and make your motion, and but there's discussion on it.
I made the motion, so let's
Okay.
discuss.
So Stasha suggested that where we talked about the population projections, and I had a sentence in there that said that we could help people. She thought that it was overstating things to say that, and so suggested that we delete that sentence so that it simply says that we expressed the opinion that they weren't necessarily right in the estimates that they had been using, and because there was uncertainty and things of that sort. So she may want to elaborate on some of that. We've exchanged emails, but I have no problem with taking that sentence out because it was not something that the group said so much as that I kind of inferred from our discussion. So so that's the one
Good.
change that I've gotten from everybody on that. And so if that's okay, then we can take.
Well,
that out.
Stasha, if you could provide a little bit of perspective on that.
Absolutely. So the line read, the MSPC, MPSC is in the position to provide such population updates to the school building committee. And so I would say we're in the position to provide not necessarily a population update, but certainly a wealth of information about how certain types you know, there's industry standards, but it's a well-known fact that it's very hard to nail down familial status because it's a protected class under the federal fair housing laws. So, for example, I can't go to Paddock Estates and say, hey, you know, we've got a similar project going on. How many families did you end up with over there? They cannot tell us that information. And so, for example, with 580 Main Street, when they were presenting, when the developers were presenting, they made comments like, you know, this isn't a perfect science, it's a desirable town, it has desirable schools, but they couldn't nail down a number either. I did get from Mark O'Hagan, we looked at this a while ago, back in 2020, when we were really trying to get those numbers, you know, for any type of housing that would come in. And you know, we ran into those hurdles of trying to nail down an actual some kind of statistical norm. And there was one resource, and it came from the National Association of Home Builders. It was a report done in 2017, and they were able to parse out from what did they use? I believe it was the census data. It was, I just want to be accurate with what I'm telling you guys. It was the 2015 American Community Survey data from the U.S. Census Bureau. They actually pulled out what a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 3-bedroom unit was norming, and in terms of children, and they did it by multiple housing units, new housing units. And so they were the most specific data that I could find. And when I went through their numbers and I compared it to the units that 580 Main Street is proposing, that estimate that they gave in their comprehensive permit was still low. So I think my bigger concern, just as a, you know, where I think that, and I'm going off on a tangent here, but this is something I'm very passionate about, because I think as a master planning committee and as a community, we really need to be prepared, not to say we don't want this project because there's going to be a bunch of kids coming in, but to say, okay, we're doing this project, there's going to be kids coming in, we need to prepare as a town for that, and let's get real about what those numbers are, you know, and find a per pupil expenditure and really hone that in. So there's a lot of data out there, and I think it warrants a lot of discussion. But beyond that one document, and even with that one document, the number is still low, what they're estimating. So anyway, so that's kind of my 2 cents on the whole thing. And I feel like we could maybe say in the minutes that we could provide insight, but definitely not hard data.
Okay, I would endorse that. However, having said that, I think it would be appropriate in the real near future to, in that context, provide that information to the district high school building committee to give them a perspective on things may be a little different than they originally anticipated based on the developers' numbers.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and there, you know, there's a vote coming up on whether or not to open school choice, and you know, looking at that, the Bolton schools had some room, and I don't know that what school committee is going to do with that vote, but the superintendent had laid out, you know, where there was potentially room for some school choice to come in, and I'm looking at those little gaps, and I'm thinking to myself, those are going to fill up really quick if we end up, you know, with the difference in numbers is the estimate from the developers range depending on the units. When we were talking about the number of units, it was like 34 to 38 school-age children were going to come in with 229 to 244 units, which was, the discussion early on in the whole process. And again, just looking at, not taking into consideration things that the developer, fairly called out, like desirable town, desirable school system, not a perfect science, even with all of that, we were up in the like 53, 54, 55 with the type of units and the number of bedrooms in those units. So, it's not hundreds of kids difference, but, every pupil costs money and needs to be considered, I would say. So I don't know. I don't know where you guys stand with like the urgency of that or the communication. I'm not necessarily on the schools group, but I'm happy to jump in with schools. But I also, I'm tied in there, so I don't want to overstep.
Well, I guess my perspective at this point, and Brian, please jump in because you know a lot more about it than I do, is that the number of students basis for the state contribution to the new school, if it is agreed to, was established without 580 Main Street. And then anything above what that number was is going to be picked up to a very large degree by the three towns. And that is a significant consideration if that number is projected to be somewhat more than was originally anticipated. Brian, what do you know about that at this point?
That's also you summed up my high level understanding of it as well. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to maybe reach out to somebody on the school building committee. I could reach out to Amy Cohen on this if it would be helpful.
Yes, it was. And having briefly spoken with Amy, she is concerned about this.
Okay. And
But
so
Sasha, if you could provide a little more definition of what you got with, the appropriate provisos, that it is not a perfect science, but this is the best data point you have, however anecdotal it may be. Let's keep it in our minds.
Okay.
But remember,
no, that's great. I can fire off some of that. Sorry.
No, when Bob and I met with Joel Bates, a year, 2 years ago, we were playing with a 50 kid. We were estimating 50 kids would come in with that. Just to get, and he wasn't floored by it at all because he realized it'd be spread over 12 grades, but he could handle, because the population of Florence Sawyer has been decreasing every year. And so he thought they could handle it. So I think
great insight.
Yeah, I think you all have to do what what you're saying, but just don't push the panic button.
No, just
Very good.
And it doesn't sound like it's a huge change, but again, anything above what was originally established prior to 580 Main Street estimates is what the state is going to belly up to, and we pick up the rest. So I think we need to take it seriously, but as you say, it's not a crisis. It's just something that we need to keep in the back of our minds, and the school committee, the school building committee, definitely needs to
be aware of it. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Is
So
there any
if we
information from the Boxborough complex?
I'm sorry, Ed?
Is there any information from the Boxborough complex at 111 and 495? Very substantial complex was put in there. Could it be 4 years ago, 5 years ago? Kind of sounds like 580 Main, right at the, right at the exit. Not interfering with anybody's home. They actually cut off a road that they have called Cunningham Road. As in some way, do we learn anything from the impact on Boxborough schools by, a very significant apartment complex? I don't know.
So Ed, that's exactly the question I begged, because it was such a similar
Right.
such a similar project with similar town statistics, et cetera, et cetera. What I was told by the community manager, Rebecca Wills, at that time was that we cannot give out any familiar status because it is a protected class under the federal housing laws. And the
Okay.
schools wouldn't give that information out anyway because of confidentiality of the students. So it's an interesting quandary to want to prepare and want to be well versed in kind of what happens in our region and not having the tools to do so.
Okay. All right.
Okay, but
But
let's
that's
go. with
I
best
beg the
we
same
can.
question.
Right.
But even if it's 8 years old, at least it gives us a perspective on a somewhat parallel situation. So if you can put that together with the appropriate provisos, Brian, if you can
Sure
talk
thing.
to Amy and give her a heads up that things may be a little bit different than we anticipated. And by the way, in the Sunday Globe, I was really happy that Bolton, well, in some respects, that Bolton was not identified as a wonderful town to move to.
Wow.
Yeah, Stowe can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so with that proviso, why don't we take out that sentence for the time being and proceed as we've discussed? Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as amended with the removal of that sentence?
I make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. It was unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. And again, as always, Ken, thank you very much for persevering and keeping these minutes going. Okay, on to the status of the rollout of the Conveo website. Wow, it's been a challenge. And I think to me, and this is not the only thing that I'm working on in terms of publicizing, times have certainly changed as a result, I would assume, of COVID. When you look at the response to past surveys, our survey, the library survey, economic development committee surveys, et cetera, the response has changed dramatically in the last 3 years. As I had forwarded to Heather as a result of a conversation that Penny had with the library, even their survey at this point has what, 106 responses, Penny?
Yeah, the problem was that they think it may have been that they rolled it out at the beginning of school vacation week, and everybody leaves town. So that may have had something to do with it. But I think it's a lack of just general interest, probably not the right word,
Right.
but the sort of need to sort of participate. And, all they're asking is, where do you see the library in the next 5 years or 10 years? And, and I think there may be some issues with the questionnaire that, even though it isn't a lot of questions, you get into a question and it gets fairly detailed, and people,
Yeah.
I talked to someone at town hall today and they said they got halfway through it and said, I'm done with this. I don't have time for this.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
So, and it may have been the survey itself, but I think the timing was probably dumb, but they're going to keep it going for another week to see if they can generate more interest. So we'll see.
Yeah, the upside they had, and I thought it was skewed, potentially skewed the results, were that they handed out information in every book that was lent out at the library.
But if nobody came in during vacation week, you can't hand out a lot of stuff.
Right.
As opposed to our approach many years ago of putting it out with the overall census information.
Yeah.
And so people thought it was.
Oh no, we did a much better job, Robert.
Anyway, having said that, we need to do not only a good job, but a better job. Mary, you had something.
Yeah, so a couple of points. I forgot about the Facebook page. I went to the town website trying to find any information on the new website, the Canova or whatever, and there's nothing there. And it took me a while to figure out, oh yeah, I have to go to the master plan Facebook page. A lot of people don't use Facebook, especially of the
Especially
older
seniors.
persuasion.
Especially seniors.
And so it is possible that maybe that's one of the reasons why you're not getting a lot of people responding to the survey. I do want to mention that there's going to be a health fair put on by the Council on Aging in May. And it's an opportunity maybe for the master plan to have paper surveys to get input. I do know when we were doing the prioritization plan mapping for complete streets, and at a COA health fair, Joe Lynch and Leslie Case set up the mapping session there, and they got quite a bit of response from the people in the room. So it's, if you've got the time, you know, it would be a good opportunity to get some responses.
Okay, that's May 17th, if I recall.
Yes, May 17th from noon to 2:30
Yeah,
And that's where, Davis or where?
at Davis Hall.
yeah.
Okay, so I think we need to have, as a minimum, a table there with information on Conveo. And we need to have, I would suggest that we let the survey go for a couple of more weeks so that we can get people who come to that to do it. And I know that the people who come to that prefer the paper survey. Yeah, it's a pain in the neck to consolidate that with the electronic version, but I think it's worthwhile.
I was at the COA meeting today, and I brought it up to see if it was appropriate to, you know, ask if the master plan could have a table, and they thought that it was perfectly
It'll
fine.
be fine. I
So,
don't see
yeah,
any
talk
problem.
to Heather or Lisa.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's fine. I don't see any issue at all.
That's a Wednesday?
It's, yes. Wednesday, 17th, May.
Senior oriented?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, it's mainly
Seniors.
for seniors, but people, a lot of people come with, you know, younger people come or have questions about how to handle their parents who may not live in town.
Okay.
So you get you know, it's mainly seniors, but you do get some younger people.
Okay, so let's do that. I'll be glad, since the other half of this household is heavily involved in that, to be there. And it'll be a
I'll
combination.
set it up with Lisa and Heather.
Okay, great. So we can do that. A couple of other things that were mentioned to me tonight at dinner were, in the past, we've had a lot of success at town meeting in having either a table or a handout as people come into town meeting. And since they're bored by town meeting, they actually read what we hand them. And we get a fair amount of visibility out of that. So I'll be happy to take care of that. If anybody else would like to join me, we'll need copies of the survey for those that are interested, and certainly information about Conveo and a very brief statement about what we're doing.
Okay, and the QR code.
Really
Right.
good idea Mary had, but having them at the health fair though. Really good idea.
Yeah, I think the QR code idea is a good one too. That, I mean, you could have some paper copies at the town meeting, but better would be just to point people to where they can go to do the survey.
Right.
And QR codes, it seems to be the way that most of the younger people do things these days.
Yes, and we do have the information that includes the QR code, so we can just print that stuff off.
Right.
Okay, so game plan for that is that I will be happy to put that together. Anybody wants to join me, let me know.
You
So
should let Pam Powell know that you want a table there.
I will do that.
Just give her a heads up.
And so we've got that, and we've got the 17th, and now we also are dealing with Backyard Bolton on May 13th.
Right.
And who have we got on board, and what have we got on board for that?
Probably what, under
surveys.
I'm no use because I'm running a book sale.
So BSC was planning on being at Backyard Bolton. We wanted to bring a few maps, 24 by 36 size, so 2 by 3. and have people respond to that and have the QR code and additional information. So
Okay, and for that, we'll have to select a location, I guess, working with Eric Nealand on that, either under cover or bring our own cover. I would prefer the former. We can possibly pull it off. And we'll need a table and we need some sort of support to put up maps, if that's what you'd like. How
Right.
many 20? Go ahead.
we
I'm
usually
sorry.
bring easels where we can kind of prop them up and we have them on foam boards so they're more sturdy,
Yep.
that kind of thing. So
That's what we've
Brian,
done.
am I correct that you have to tell Eric you want a place, but you've got to
Yeah.
bring your own table and you really need a tent? Because
How
it
about
gets
under the
really,
pavilion?
get really hot out there.
If we can
Pavilion,
get under the pavilion, we're
pavilion
free.
for nonprofits. That's my understanding of the plan.
Oh, they're putting everybody under the
Pavilion for
pavilion.
nonprofits. Mhm.
They could have a lot of nonprofits there, you know.
Well, bring your own tent then.
Yeah, but you
So-
definitely have to get out of the sun.
Big
okay,
point.
one way or the other. I'll talk to Eric.
Yeah.
Since we have board commonality, and determine where and what we need in order to do that. And if there is need for additional easels, Heather or Olivia, let me know. I'm the town easel person. And I can provide it easily.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, that's bad. I agree, Brian.
I know, I'm sorry.
It makes it amazing because it's bag. I appreciate that.
I'm suddenly thinking about stickers with the QR code and a little thing that says master plan or something like that underneath. And that would work at town meeting, would work at Backyard Bolton. You could stick it on God knows what. What do you think? Can we try it?
Yeah, what kind of stickers are you thinking? I'd like to
Little
stick it
round
on-
sticker with a QR code, honest to God, just a little round circle, QR code in the middle. Something that just says, master plan with a big exclamation mark or something. I don't know. We can figure out the verbiage, but something short so they know what the heck they've got on that QR code. And you could paste
So-
that on your warrant as you came in to the town meeting.
So I would assume that Dennison has a standard template for that stuff,
Okay,
in any shape or size we want. Olivia, could you take a look at that and see if your excellent design people could come up with a pertinent
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
statement, a very simple pertinent statement, like
Mhm.
Zed described.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
But again, I think we're in a somewhat uphill battle here about engaging the public on a lot of this. I mean, Brian has seen what has happened with candidates night, which had
Right.
3 residents, 2 candidates,
Yep.
2 press people, and that was it. And then I gather last night, Brian, at the review of the budget, it was even less, which is shocking.
Mhm.
That's, things have changed dramatically in terms of resident engagement.
Right.
Do you
It's either
think
don't
it
care or
would-
too much time.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Olivia, you were saying?
Well, I was just gonna ask, do you think it would be appropriate to post something about it on maybe one of the town Facebook pages aside from the master plan, or maybe like next door? Because I know a lot of people, especially people with opinions, like to use those websites, and maybe that would draw more attention and kind of garner interest of other folks that we haven't reached yet. But again, I know sometimes.
Ed, you've done some of that, have you not?
I have, absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Next door is good, but it's amazing how things just get lost. You can
Yeah.
see something once and it is hell to pay to go back and say, I know I saw such and such an
Well,
event.
where is it?
Where is it? Where did it go? And it evaporates.
I have
Also,
a, oh, sorry, go ahead, Danny.
the Council on Aging has a newsletter that goes out once a month.
True. Yep.
that you could get information on that. Mary, do you know when the next deadline is? Like, since I wasn't at the meeting?
Unfortunately, they wanted to get everything in for May, so May is probably already done, but contact Heather. There may be a chance to
Yeah,
slip something
Heather
in.
Goodsell, and I can get you the phone number for that.
Well,
Okay, so-
actually, no. I mean, it's, I'm thinking May 1st is Monday. Yeah,
that's
maybe
true.
it might be too
Yeah.
late.
So it'd have to be for June. Yeah, that's true.
There's
I
no
just-
way of getting it in for May? I mean, like if we did something tomorrow?
Talk to Heather.
Yeah.
So
I can
Penny,
give Heather a call in the morning if you want. Come
yeah,
up.
not that you have influence or anything, but you know her.
I just had a quick question on who we need at Backyard Bolton. So it sounds like there's going to be a couple of people from BSC there. I'm happy to join you if it would be helpful in any way. Just I'm going to follow your lead, so just let me know what would be helpful.
Well, I'll be there. I mean, Heather, Olivia,
Yeah, I think the more the merrier.
Is it a morning or afternoon event?
Like 10,
It's 10 to
10 to
1.
1 or 10 to 2.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah, something
I
like that.
I can be there at the first hour or so, if you want.
And I can send everyone from the book sale down there,
That's true.
because I get a lot of people from 9:30 until 1.
Right.
Where's
So-
the book sale?
Pardon me?
Where's the book sale?
It's down, a little farther down from the common. It's the
at the
Houghton
Houghton
building,
Building.
across from the
Houghton
school.
So
The white
would
building.
would it make sense to have maybe something with the QR code there too?
Oh, absolutely. I can push anything.
Okay.
Take their money and give them the QR code. Not a problem.
As a bookmark or something. I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe.
I can
Except we
help.
just
with
have
that.
to make sure it's in towners, not out of towners.
I can help
So
with that,
right
Ann.
now, it looks like we'll have Heather and Olivia, Ken for an hour in the morning. I'll be there as necessary full time. And it sounds like Brian could contribute. Brian, what's your timing like?
Should be pretty flexible that day because my parents will be in town, so we have child.
It'd be footloose and Francie and kid free.
Same here.
Okay. Okay, so I think that takes care of the opportunities we have to publicize. We need to get on with that quickly. First of all, with respect to Council on Aging, move quickly on that and talk to Heather and the FOGS organization. Ah.
Okay.
Okay,
Handout for Monday,
right.
for the town meeting, if you're gonna have a handout for the town meeting, that's only 6 days away, so.
Okay, Olivia, can you
Quick.
look into the possibility of getting some sort of design out? Let me know. I hate to do this to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I will look into what we can get in the way of sticky templates that
Mhm.
would fit the graphics that you guys can develop.
Okay.
And we'll go with that.
Yeah, perfect.
I think we don't have, I should think 50 would be more than enough. So I'll look into that.
Bob, one question about when I call Heather tomorrow morning at San Galiar. Do you want to have an insert to put into the newsletter, or do you want
Yeah.
it printed in the newsletter?
Either way, but if she's still working on, format and editing and composition, it'd be great to just have it in the newsletter, but if not,
She doesn't have room, though. You could have another week to get it to her printed, and they can insert it when they're folding it.
what's the distribution, the circulation of the newsletter?
Oh, probably. Oh, I'm just taking a wild guess. Mary, what do you think?
What?
What the number of newsletters that go out?
I I don't know how many they print out.
I
And
think
mail out.
100 to 200.
Okay, so
But
that's,
I will get the number from Heather if she
okay,
can,
but it's not a huge printing run,
no,
something that can come off a printer.
okay.
Hey, Bob,
Yes,
can I, just a quick question. I can't figure out how to raise my hand on my phone, so I'm just gonna shout out.
Just wave.
And forgive me. Yeah, exactly. Just a quick question. The QR code, does anybody have the like a JPEG or just a really clean copy of that we could get sent to all of the members, so that if we wanted to print it out and stick it on our own stuff or hand it to somebody or screenshot it and forward it, that we would have a nice, clean JPEG or something
Yes.
to do that with?
Yes,
Olivia, you have
Okay.
that. right?
Yeah,
Olivia.
Can
And
I
also-
get a copy of that?
yeah, definitely. And I think
Everybody
tomorrow,
on the committee.
the design that I come up with, or I'll work with maybe some folks on our,
Do we have,
but sometimes QR codes, people are hesitant to scan them unless it says specifically what it's for. So I
right.
think having something to indicate where it's taking you will be good.
Yeah,
Correct.
awesome.
Just so you never know, but yeah, I'll make sure that that goes on there.
That is so appreciated. Thank you.
okay, and that's something that would be very nice to put up on our G Suite. Now that I have figured out how to make all that work
Okay,
very cheaply. I just eliminated all of my content and put yours in it. Okay, status of BSC's progress. And
Yeah,
one or
I
both of
think,
you jump into that?
Sure, I have a little slide to kind of show everyone, but I don't think I can share my screen.
Brian, oh, Todd, can you open sharing?
And yes, I can. Hang on one quick second. There you go. Give it a shot now.
Perfect. So just a little summary of what we've been working on. We've been starting to draft some of the chapters, including the background and current context of the town as it pertains to all the chapters. And specifically, we've been jumping into the transportation chapter, natural, cultural, and historic resources, and the open space and recreation chapter. And as we continue with mapping efforts, then we can synthesize some more of the population data that we're finding. I think those will come nicely together, especially the maps will give us a lot of information that we can tell a story with. So those are coming together, and hopefully we can, I have more at the end to kind of discuss with next steps, but I think that we should hopefully have drafts coming together soon. I know last time we spoke, there was some curiosity about what population projections there were out there. And so some of the information that I pulled together was from MassDOT, the Donahue Institute, and I believe it's the School Building Authority. So there are 3 different kind of data sets that I was working through to better understand the trajectory that the town is going in. So, I mean, as you can see here, it definitely shows an incline in population. And this was my attempt to show how age distribution will grow and shrink over time, depending on the age bracket. So as we see kind of in the future, we're seeing a more higher population of middle-aged to older generations, and a bit of a decline in early 20s, early 30s, as well as a little bit of a decline in school-aged children, which is a trend that I noticed throughout most of the data sets.
But just go back to that for a minute.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to note that the overall population may be progressing, slowly, and the fact that you have a truncated graph on the left makes it look a little more extreme than it really is, much
Right.
more level. But what is interesting, I think, is on the right, as you look at the senior level portion of the curve, even though it's lower, which some people may question, I don't. It, in the context of the overall population, it becomes larger. And I'm not sure how we want to illustrate that, but it's pretty important. That orange curve moves out, as well as the 2035 and 2030 curve move out well ahead of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is also an indicator of folks kind of staying in town as they're aging over time. And then the typical trend of younger folks kind of not having as many children and typically looking towards living in more urban areas, but kind of retaining that middle-aged population.
But it's interesting also in terms of proactivity on the housing side of the business, that curve to the right will change in terms of the available housing and the affordability of housing for seniors. I think that's something we need to point out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got to, first of all, accommodate it, but at the same time, it will be influenced, that if people want to stay in town, we've got to do something about that.
Yeah,
And
a lot
just
of
so everybody knows, seniors are considered by the state 60 and above, not 65. Just so you know.
yeah, a lot of the state reports and trends also discuss how 20 to 30s and also the aging population have a tendency to be more interested in apartment style, townhouse, condo type of housing and less interested in typical single family standalone houses.
But that's something that the planning board has to very seriously take into consideration in terms of smaller structures, multi-use, multi-family residences, and much more innovative approaches to mixed housing in order to accommodate that. So that's, I think, right smack on the front door of the planning board.
Mhm.
Another visual that I thought was helpful was a comparison with, this is Metropolitan Area Planning Council data, and they give future projections. This is older, it's an older data set from, I think, 2014. And I'll show you on the next slide, but a lot of their data is more generous estimates. So they estimate a higher population by 2030, 2040, but nothing super dramatic. So it is a helpful graphic to look at, and it kind of indicates the trend overall. So we see that Bolton definitely has the largest over 65 population that is expected to grow to 2030. And then we're seeing a decline in those under the age 15. And in comparison to other areas of Metro Boston and other suburbs, that these are the most dramatic increases and decreases over time.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful graphic.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is. Wow.
This is very alarming to look at first. It's a lot of numbers, but they provide, or MAPC provides a status quo and a stronger region population projection. So I thought it was interesting to look at them side by side. The status quo is a more conservative estimate, and you know, kind of indicates that if the population stays at its current growth rate, this is what we might see the future of Bolton to look like based on households and housing units. So under the status quo, we see a bit smaller projections, but in comparison to today's numbers in the town based on households and housing units, like I mentioned, the projections are a little bit higher, but not far off at all. I think the town has maybe right under 2,000 housing units currently. So it's kind of sitting
Mhm.
Kind of
Well, I
similar.
know the projection for the over 65, and I wonder if it's over 65 or over 60, because the state considers a senior over 60, but we're well over 1,000. So we're
Yeah.
past the 827, 37. We're more like what it's saying for 2030. We're
Yeah.
close to that.
Okay, so we're kind of reaching towards that 2030 benchmark sooner than
Yeah.
anticipated.
Is there a way to get the information on over 60?
They only provide over 65 in their kind of Bolton summary, but I think their data sets definitely probably break it down by age bracket. But let's see, over here it kind of shows, well, I guess this is more looking at grades, but yeah, I could see if they have over 60, and try to see what that projection.
Yeah, it'd just be nice to be consistent.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, the two data sets kind of go their own way, but I thought it was a good kind of way to compare a more generous estimate and a more conservative estimate, to kind of see which direction the town's going. As Penny mentioned, it seems like it is more of the stronger region population projection.
Well, thank you, Boston Globe, for making us not a desirable town.
And then down here, they kind of show housing unit demand change. Bolton, they unfortunately don't really provide multifamily or rental projections, but from the surrounding areas can kind of get an estimate. The next visual was related to school enrollment, and I thought this was a very dramatic visual, but if you look at the axis here, it's not as significant as it looks. And then I also thought it was helpful to look at it side by side with annual birth rates by town in comparison with Lancaster and Stowe. And so we see Bolton kind of over time growing and declining annual birth rates. That trend isn't as significant as we see in like Stowe or certain parts of Lancaster, but it does follow the overall trend of annual births over time.
It's interesting that Bolton seems to, it's mashed by the overall and the fact that you're stacking them. But it looks like Bolton has had the least change. Certainly not the almost 2-to-1 of the aggregate. That's interesting. Anyway, enough said.
This is a visual that you might have seen before. It was produced by BSC for the Apple Country Climate Solutions effort. So this is a map that I pulled to kind of give everyone a sense of how much green space and recreational open space is really in Bolton. And I wanted to show this first because we have two other maps. And I think it's helpful to kind of see how much there really is. And this is the land use map that our GIS team produced. It's kind of just a preliminary draft to get a sense of how much each type of land use is making up the town. So there's definitely a heavy amount of residential as well as agricultural, and a lot of the exempt is that open space, which usually is like.
What is exempt?
I think the state, so these are all categorized by the tax code, I believe. And exempt, I think, is like nonprofit or conservation.
Municipal, state, any of those properties that are they don't pay
Non-taxable.
taxes. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Why do you, I think tax exempt would be a better name.
Yeah. yeah, taxes could be better.
Hmm.
But then we see kind of these clusters of commercial and those more isolated instances, and then your industrial. And then next map kind of shows where housing units were built and what years. So we see a lot were built between 1951 and 2000. It kind of paints a picture of how development in the town has progressed. And then it's very small here, but you can see in the downtown area, there's a lot of buildings from the town's earlier stages. So kind of, like I said, paints a picture of development over time. And then years built unknown is just kind of going back to this open space visual. A lot of it is land that hasn't been built on. So that's why it says that there.
There is one other map that we're working on that wasn't ready in time for this meeting, but we wanted to try to eliminate all of the different environmental constraints, as well as, you know, constructed properties to get a real sense of what developable land still remains. And at a point where we're pretty confident in kind of that elimination of those parcels and having something to come to you with to discuss and have you say, oh, well, you've got this right, but you kind of missed that or anything like that. Hopefully by the next meeting, we'll be able to have that for you. And from there, we can look at the zoning and then, you know, help make projections of how many future units could be built, that kind of thing. So just planting that seed for now until we're able to show you that image, but we are working on it.
Yeah, that brings up a couple of issues. I would guess that the primary cause for undevelopable remaining land is wetlands. And certainly Rebecca has done a great job in identifying that. But I'm curious whether there are other restraints for development, slope, soil, anything like that. And as Todd knows, as the available land, which we would have called developable land, has disappeared, the stuff that we would have called undevelopable land is now being developed, which is a huge challenge from a planning perspective and a planning board regulatory perspective.
So what I wanted in terms of when I say environmental constraints, looking at the protected open space as being something that can't be developed.
Right.
Looking at private land only if it's protected. So if it's private open space, it still could become developed at some point. So if there's no protections on it, like a conservation restriction or something like that, then, you know, that's kind of gonna take that out of that limitation. Looking at the water bodies, streams, rivers, even looking at 200-foot like riverfront areas, you know, those buffer areas, as well as wetlands, certified vernal pools, the like priority in estimated habitats for like rare species and endangered species, and then roadways, and then kind of seeing what we get out of it from there. And then looking at, okay, well, this is definitely a subdivision that was just developed. And then, you know, commercial land that's been recently developed, that kind of a thing. And then saying, you know, one of the things I expect would be the international would come out as a developable parcel if there's no protections on it. And you know, looking at where those larger tracts of land are and figuring out from there, you know, what is that potential?
Right.
Could
And
I ask a quick question? Oh, sorry.
no, the international does have limitations on it though.
Is it for the entire site or is it only a portion of the site?
No, it's a portion of the site.
Right. Yeah. So we would take out that portion, but we
Yep.
would leave the rest of it.
Yeah,
So it might not follow parcel lines necessarily, but it would identify areas of land.
that's correct. Now, the other issue, and I think this goes from status quo to projections and alternative approaches to doing business of, are there other ways of developing the remaining developable land that accommodate a range of housing but maintain open space and rural character at the same time? And I get back to what a number of towns are looking into, the residential open space development, ROSD, and similar approaches. So that's something that certainly we'll discuss within the planning board, but I think the master plan needs to address that as well. Not necessarily in a definitive recommendation, but what needs to be looked at in order to come up with a better way of developing the remaining, quote, developable land.
Bob, can
Yep.
I jump off of what you're saying there? Just because there was an estimate done, I think back in 2000, and I think it was MAPC that did it. They were trying to project out the full build of the town, and one of the things that they didn't consider, or the assumption that made, in my opinion, made that the numbers a little bit illegitimate at the time, was that they didn't consider the 40B law. And so there was a lot of, because our town for so long sat vulnerable to that, the projections, they considered, they assumed that we had met our 40B requirements. We obviously now will, and moving forward, will have met them, at least for the foreseeable future with 580 Main Street. So I would just offer to be at the BSC group that if we're going to go down the road, as we should in the master plan, of kind of projecting a full build out of the town, that there's something specific in there that says what our assumptions are about that. Are we assuming that we are going to maintain a safe haven from a 40B kind of developable land? And you know, to your point, Bob, also an open space residential design, you know, what does that do? You know, if we add that bylaw in, we're going in one direction. If we are subject to 40B in the future, that takes us in another density direction. And so those numbers get very gray as you look out, which is obviously what the master plan needs to do, depending on those variables. So I would, that was just something that I guess I would encourage us to be very clear about in the plan.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And it would be nice to come up with at least some suggestive statistics based on what other towns have done, for instance, with ROSD, in terms of providing housing and the ratio of open space to residential footprint, I think is a better way.
Right.
To see
Yep.
how it skews that projection. But I remember the build out, and Ken Troop is very aware of this, the 2000 build out estimate that MAPC did, which assumed, first of all,
Right.
didn't know anything about 40B, but they did assume that our zoning, our 1.5 acre and 4.5 acre backland zoning would remain the same. And, you know, ROSD and phosphorus and other things could significantly change that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Good to keep going?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
I know we kind of discussed this already, but just to summarize what we're expecting for Backyard Bolton, we want to really push the survey. I think right now we're around 21 responses. Get that face-to-face time with community members, like Heather mentioned, do the display of maps and interactive poster boards. And then I thought it also might be helpful to have visuals and more information about agricultural and open space residential design to kind of show people what that might look like and how it could fit in their town. And then this is just a flyer that put up on the Conveo site to kind of advertise our presence.
Yeah, and one of the other things that occurred to me actually the last couple of days is that Apple Country project and the Bolton Clinton municipal vulnerability project have both made recommendations for better climate and environmental solutions that should be incorporated or could be incorporated in regulations and the zoning bylaws. So I think that's something else. And Todd, you have those, I have those, I believe at this point. And
That's
we
correct.
all distribute those. And they're very detailed. I mean, they go basically by element of the zoning bylaws and regulations, line by line item, and make specific recommendations. But I think we need to scroll through those and be aware of what they are and take those into consideration when we make recommendations for the implementation plan.
Absolutely.
So I will get those out to everybody, both on the master plan steering committee, and Todd, if you don't mind, I'll shoot them out to the planning board as well.
Definitely.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, in a similar manner. Next steps. So like Heather mentioned, we're working on the developable land map and additional maps that will supplement the following chapters listed below, as well as the master plan in its entirety. But I think an actionable item that we could all work together on is identifying issues and opportunities and keeping in mind that the survey is still continuing. That might raise other issues and opportunities aside from the ones that we identify. But I think doing this as a group, this will help with the further selection of goals and then also inform our recommendations. But considering that we have been working on these 3 chapters at the moment, I think it would be a good action for us to kind of pull these together. And I also pulled these from your prior engagement where community members did a SWOT analysis. So I think that this is also a resource that we can use to kind of narrow that down while also looking at the draft goals pulled from a lot of the relevant reports that pertain to those chapters. But working towards identifying those would be very helpful also in the drafting of the chapters.
So moving forward, in addressing this, are you looking for us initially on a task group basis in the next 2 or 3 weeks to come up with objectives and our recommendations, and then have an integrated review of those for at least these 3?
I think I'll get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, my thought process was that since as a steering committee, I'm sure there are kind of issues on the top of your minds that are relevant to each of these chapters. And maybe that looks like everybody kind of writing 2 down, sending them to me, or as a group, maybe coming up with a couple issues and opportunities that you would hope to see included in the master plan. And that way we can kind of start to take our writing in that direction. And,
Now, did you look through that matrix that Brian sent you?
Yes. Yes. So, and everything on the Google Drive is also accessible.
Okay.
But I think that
Is this presentation
narrowing-
on Google Drive?
this is not, but I'll add it on there tonight.
Where would you put it, just so we don't get lost?
Would it be helpful if I made a separate folder and then just put it in there, or would it be?
Yeah, It would. I mean, what I've typically done, and you've probably seen it, in the steering committee folder under meetings, I've broken out every meeting by date. And then wherever there was additional information that was presented during the meeting, over and above Ken's minutes of the meeting, I've included that in that meeting folder. But I think that you got to dig through a lot of stuff to find anything pertinent. And I think you're right. If you can put the information that you've developed as a result of presentations and conversations in the meeting in one folder, thoughtfully structured, it'll make, I think, everybody's life easier.
Yeah, I can absolutely do that.
Okay, and I think, I hope everybody has determined they have access and can edit within the Google Drive.
Yes, it's working.
Okay, good.
So
Mary,
yeah, seeing as the top two are task groups that I'm involved in, just so that I know, if you can let me know where I can find this. I mean, you had indicated that it's going to be in a separate folder, but will it be under today's meeting information? Or is it
No,
going
I
to be
think-
somewhere else?
I think it should go with, and I'm violating my standard here. I think it's useful to have it in the meeting folder, but I think it would be more useful to have it in one BSC folder that you can go through and pull out anything you want, rather
Okay.
than dig through a bunch of meeting folders.
Okay.
So Olivia is going to set that up.
Yeah.
And Olivia, if you can send that out, I mean, you've got the emails of all of the steering committee. If you can
Yes.
let everybody know what that folder is. And since it's going to be under the master plan, everybody will automatically have access.
Yeah. And then kind of to follow up with what Mary said about being on those two task groups. I'm not sure if like this would work for everybody to collectively input on, because I know Brian mentioned that not every task group has its original members still intact, but I guess whatever you guys see is the best way forward with that
Okay.
works for me. But
Well, that brings up another important point that I have overlooked. And that is that there are people who are not on the steering committee who are working on these task groups. And if they need information, please forward their emails to me or let me know, and I will give them permission, edit permission to the whole thing. And I don't think anybody will destroy it. Even if they do, we can undo the destruction.
sounds good.
Very
Hey,
reassuring.
Mary, one specific question, since I've had a lot of questions about it. Your thoughts on a community center?
Badly needed.
Very badly needed.
Community
Okay, and I
center
think-
/ senior center.
I mean, right now, it's critical that there be a senior center, but I mean, it seems that the general thought is that that won't fly and it would have to be a community center.
Well, I mean, yeah, I would agree with that. It would be very nice to have a multifunctional, multi-generational center in Bolton, which we do not have. I mean,
Right.
we also have the tremendous challenge, frankly, of accommodation of our town government staff, which is living in a dungeon right now. Much as I love antique buildings, it's no longer appropriate for a town of this size.
As-
But
as a
even if
resident-
you,
As a
even-
resident of said dungeon, I say here to that.
Yes, because you're in the basement of the dungeon.
In the corner, no less. So yeah, makes me feel special. I have a corner office.
With a
um,
window.
but if you look at, even if you look at other spaces available throughout town, there's really nothing big enough to accommodate. I mean, the library's meeting room can hold what, up to 30 to 50 people. Davis Hall seems to be really the only place where you could bring in large groups of people.
It's our de facto community center.
Yeah,
It is, always has been.
And it's also really important for a community center to have it arranged, because not only do the seniors need a place to meet, they need interaction with other generations, the wee ones, the middle ones, the kids, the high school kids, the 20, 30, 40, and 50-year-olds. So it's really important for that intergenerational mix.
Yeah.
Yes.
My concern is 580 Main Street and what that's going to do to the present senior center as far as access.
Right.
yeah, and I think again, I think we can no longer think about this on a single generation piecewise approach, that we need to really think big, look at available land within Bolton, and come up with an overall functional definition of what a senior center, and by that I don't necessarily mean building alone, what it ought to look like and what it ought to accommodate, and then start moving forward. And we've had discussions about the Boy Scout camp, which, for my money would be the be all and end all, because it not only would support a senior center in town offices, but it would own the pond, and it would have a lot of outdoor space that would be available for community events. I mean, the common's nice. I really like it, but we've been involved in it a little bit.
But I think that the committee, Bob, should be talking about a community center, which would involve seniors and all generations.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Wide range of function, et cetera. So, but hey, we've only been talking about this for 40 years, so maybe we can finally get some direction.
Well, 19 Carter in Berlin is a good example of just a lovely community center that de facto is largely a senior center. I partake of their activities as much as I can. It certainly attracts seniors, certainly during the day, but there's a pretty active program of entertainment in the evenings. It's very multi-generational. There's a lot of children's activities in the basement. But a lot of senior centers do seem to have had a previous life. I'm grasping to think of a senior center that was built from the ground up. Most seem to be old schools, administration buildings of some kind, churches, and so on.
West Boylston has a
Mark
brand new senior center.
Yeah, was that brand new?
Brand new. I've been there.
I thought that it's beautiful, isn't it? I
it's
thought
brand
maybe it was
new.
a golf club or something.
The town of Barry also has one that was purpose built,
Okay, that's rare. That's interesting.
but
But I
it was a sec. I'm so sorry, Penny. It was
I think-
basically they outgrew their existing senior center, which
Right.
was, of course, something that was inherited and had a previous life beforehand.
Right.
And for
Right.
those
Hey,
who know,
Brian? I'm
the
sorry.
present community the present senior center literally is a room inside the senior housing.
It's unacceptable.
One room.
Unacceptable.
And
Hey, Brian.
it's not and who hasn't been there, it's just a room.
It's terrible.
Brian?
Yeah, sure. And I didn't want to cut off the discussion. This is just backtracking slightly. I just wanted to mention to Heather and Olivia for preparation for Backyard Bolton. I don't know if this will come up, but I feel like since we'll just have had annual town meeting, there's often a lot of people having opinions about different forms of participation within town and how people say, oh, we shouldn't have town meeting on a Monday, or can't we have electronic ways of participating and all that stuff. And so I just wanted to prep you for the fact that you may get questions about how other communities handle that. And I also think it is something that we should address in our master plan, because there are some legal regulations that apply to forms of electronic participation in towns with open meeting, but B, I think it is the 21st century. And if we continue to insist on just the old ways of participating, I'm afraid we're going to start losing a lot of voices. So just wanted to flag that for you.
Okay.
No, that's an excellent point. And Brian, that directly addresses the whole issue of participation right straight across the board, which we've seen fall off, again, probably for a number of reasons, dramatically in the last 5 to 10 years, and specifically in the last 3. So yes, that's a really good and critical point.
Right.
We'd like to get more than 2 residences to your next budget review.
I know.
Okay, I think that's pretty much it.
About it.
All right.
Next meeting?
Let me look at our calendar here. Go back to our regular meeting, 4th Thursday.
Brian, can you do that once you're selectman?
Oh, that's a good point.
He can't be a member of the committee, but he can be an advisor.
Well, that
The
wasn't.
ex
Remember?
officio
I
at that
have a
point.
fe- I
But,
don't
but
know
the,
if you
but
could
the issue
appoint
was,
yourself
could
to
he
be a
come on
member.
No,
Thursday?
the timing is the issue.
Yeah. Do you normally meet the first and third these days?
They're
Uh,
meeting this Thursday, which would be the 4th Thursday of the
So
month.
there'd be 2 weeks
Yeah,
later.
but they have an annual town meeting next week, so that's more than justifiable.
And then the election is a week later.
Yeah, it's
You may
looking.
get elected, kid, and
So
Well,
I
as it
don't
happens,
know.
as it happens, May has 5 Wednesdays. So he could do it on the 31st. And that's not gonna get in anybody's way.
we want to keep
Except
Brian
he
for
is.
as long as we can.
Yeah, unfortunately, the meetings for May are not scheduled, so I don't know whether it's going to be the 4th and the 18th or the 11th and the 25th.
Well, Todd and Bob, is Wednesday, the 31st, something the planning board would normally use
No,
or would
not
likely
this
use?
year.
So
No, ours is 2nd and.
why don't we choose Wednesday, the 31st? Then it's not in anybody's way.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just
I can do that.
suggestion.
So that would be the 5th Wednesday.
The 5th Wednesday,
Okay.
right?
What's the date? Wednesday,
Wednesday,
31.
May 31st.
May
Yeah.
31st.
I think we're gonna have a problem with Kia.
Okay. Well,
It's a good
Yeah,
point.
because she works on
Yeah,
Wednesday.
she works.
She works
That's her
late on
deadline
Wednesday.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
But also, I mean, if it's gonna, so May is unusual that it has, the 5th week Wednesday, but Wednesdays, the 2nd and 4th are not doable for me.
How are Tuesdays for everyone?
Tuesdays are good.
not
Yeah,
too,
Tuesdays are pretty good for me.
okay. The 30th would be all right, or even the 23rd for that matter.
Ed, they're not good for you?
actually 30th works.
30th works for me as well.
Try that.
Okay, so Tuesday, the 31st,
Very
Yeah.
good.
I mean,
Great.
30th, sorry,
Yep,
Tuesday, the 30th. Okay.
Yes.
great. Thank you very much. And Olivia, I'm gonna hear from you tomorrow.
Yes, you will.
Excellent.
and Bob, as soon as I get hold of Heather to see about whether you can add the survey or just insert it. And
Okay.
I'll get back to you tomorrow morning.
And I'll talk to Pam and Doug about town meeting and Eric about backyard Bolton.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do I
Thanks.
serve
So,
your
do we-
motion?
Want a
We have to
motion
vote to adjourn?
Yeah, that would,
Motion to adjourn, sir?
I'm sorry, everybody said it at the same time.
Second.
Ed, you're second, right?
Yes.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Good night.
All right.
Night.
Aye.
Thank
Good
you, everyone.
night.
Take care.